Okay, this part isn't so bad, but there's still homosexual content anyway. Open Door, a John Locke fanfiction by Nightmare Kisser, Part 3. Okay, I guess that's my volume now. The following 2 weeks go smoothly, thankfully. Sherlock is able to keep his feelings under control, and a new case distracts him shortly after his kidney experiment comes to a conclusive result. The case is a mild one, a client-given case that is solved in 2 days, but it helps. Everything helps, because everything that takes Sherlock's mind off John is safe, doable. But he can't skate by forever, he's sure of it. He will try to hold out for as long as possible without a slip if he can, and he is more than capable, because while he has always found John more difficult to act in front of and manipulate than others, John also has the tendency to be gullible enough to believe Sherlock when he says, "I'm fine," more often than not. And he's plenty fine these days. More than fine, because it's all fine, isn't it? He's using John's words for this, for suppressing his homoerotic sentiments in favour of denial and other convenience. Yes, it's all fine to feel this way. Perfectly fine indeed. One evening, a month following Sherlock's peeping mistake, John comes and sits beside Sherlock on the sofa, casually picking up his feet and dropping them into his lap to make room for himself at the end of the sofa. He picks up the remote, flips on the telly, and watches a rerun of Merlin. You know, sometimes I think that Merlin kid could be your younger cousin or something, John muses with a smile. Dark hair, high prominent cheekbones, full lips, thin frame, deathly pale. He might as well be related to you with all that in common. And he chuckles to himself. But I reckon if you could use magic, you'd blow him out of the water, seeing how you're much cleverer. There's a compliment in there. In fact, there are a few, most of them in disguise as pointing out similarities that hardly exist, and, naturally, calling him clever, like always, but this time without the awe or the occasional sarcasm. This one is like a fax, like how his appearance was clearly described, but with affection mixed in there somewhere to make it a compliment. Sherlock mulls this conundrum over. Why is John looking for an excuse to compliment his appearance and remark on his smarts? It couldn't be that. No, that's not right. John has no interest in men, unless there is an exception. Unless... Don't be ridiculous, John. He and I look nothing alike. Not at all. My lips are a completely different shape, more of a heart. And his ears stick out more than mine, and my hair naturally curls. Not to mention the way my eyes slant and his do not. Plus, his actor is Irish. Can't you hear the slight lilt even through the English accent he tries to put on? No, we can't possibly be related, Sherlock states. He knows for a fact John didn't mean this literally, and John is about to say so if Sherlock is correct. And, hopefully, he'll give his true reason for the statement in 3, 2, 1. John shakes his head. I didn't mean it accurately, I was just pointing out that he reminds me of you, just a little, like how I imagine you might have looked when you were a teenager. His actor is in his mid-20s, Sherlock corrects. Is he? He looks like he's 19, John laughs. Ah, well, looks are deceiving until you hit about 35, I suppose. Sherlock gives pause, watches the screen for a moment, then softly he ventures, what would you be thinking, even hypothetically or curiously, about what I looked like when I was young? John turns and looks Sherlock in the eye. He drops his hand from the back of the sofa and runs it through his hair. Well, I guess because I wonder how anyone like you could have been a child at one point, even though you obviously had to have been. You're very unreal, do you know that? John admits with a slight smile. You're an old soul, as they say. I can't picture you ever acting much like a kid. You must have been very mature very young, being as brilliant as you are. It's true. His talents of observation and deduction were raw, but evident, even as a child. He would meet adults when he was 6 and look at them and be able to figure out, more often than not, what sort of occupation they were in, or at least if they were a liar or not. He didn't know how he knew until he was roughly 10, when he began looking for and dissecting tales, and it all developed from there. His imagination was wild as a child, enabling him to think himself a pirate, or think himself a scientist as he dissected animals in school, and go as far as to start questioning crime, as he did when he was about 15 and Carl Powers was murdered. So John isn't off base at all. Sherlock has always been different, and he has always had an air about him, his mother's friends would say, that made him feel far more adult than he was. This often got him into trouble. Either more was expected of him, more beyond his age, or he was told things he shouldn't have yet known because people thought he could handle it. He couldn't. He learned to cope by becoming indifferent, and becoming rather passive about people and their feelings. Actually, Sherlock, I've wondered, did you have friends, or special people in your life while growing up? I know how things are now, and it makes me worried for your past sometimes, especially knowing that you used to do drugs, John murmurs, his hands falling to Sherlock's feet and idly rubbing a thumb over his ankle bone, and under the arch of one foot. And God, that feels good. Just a gentle brush of skin, and Sherlock has to focus on the question and not the sensation. Any friends I made in primary school? I lost within a week or less, Sherlock answers quietly. He swallows because of the sensitive topic and to stifle a soft sigh from how John is touching his ankle, running the tips of his fingers up the base of Sherlock's shin, ghosting over a leg hair, making it tickle. I was a very, very blunt child that didn't know how to hold my tongue. Eventually I learned not to speak at all unless it was showing off by answering a question from the teacher or correcting the teacher when they made a mistake. This made me even more disliked, however, so I gave up. I knew people once I hit university, of course, but it weren't friends by no definition. Only in my middle age, now, have I made any form of friendships, and those are limited to approximately 4 people in total. Me, Lestrade, Miss Hudson, Molly, John listed to himself. Yes, I figured as much. His contact slows to a stop atop both of Sherlock's feet. He looks him in the eye again. There's something there. It looks as though John wishes to comfort Sherlock in some way, to make up for how people have mistreated him. Unspoken, but implied. Sherlock was ignored, possibly bullied sporadically throughout his life. Don't look at me like that, Sherlock scoffs, turning his head to look at their armchairs, the fireplace, unlit, the screen, anything but John's face. John's kind but calloused hands. John, I don't want pity. I have managed perfectly fine, and I am fortunate enough not to have to worry about any of that anymore. It's in the past, and it's irrelevant all around. Not irrelevant, Sherlock, John murmurs, and there's a shift of weight, and Sherlock jerks his head back to find John bracing his forearm on the back of the sofa, his torso leaning towards Sherlock. Not to me. It explains a lot, and it isn't fair. Sherlock doesn't have a biting remark for that. He simply swallows again and feels John's other hand gripping his calf for balance as he leans closer. And Sherlock wants to lift his head and kiss John, or he nearly expects John to kiss him, but instead, John grabs Sherlock's hand slung over his chest and pulls him up into sitting position, pushing his feet to the floor and bringing him into his arms. John, Sherlock grumbles, mouth dry, head pressed to John's sternum by his right hand, and he can hear John's heart beating rapidly, thumper thumper thump. Why are you trying to comfort me? I don't need it. It's not a wound, not something you can heal with an embrace. I'm the doctor here. I'll decide if you're injured and need healing, and I say you do, so shut up, John retorts. And honestly, Sherlock is too thrilled internally to pull away or reject it. His own heart could race against John and possibly lap his race if there were Olympic racers on a track. Sherlock doesn't make a move to return to embrace, But he longs to. He wants nothing more than to turn fully into John's body and straddle his lap and bury his face on John's neck and breathe against his skin and wrap his arms under John's and under his shirt and feel his warm back and cry, or kiss, or confess. But it's not his nature, and John wouldn't allow it. It would be too strange, too uncomfortable. This is friendly gesture from an empathetic flatmate. That is all. Finally, after a short eternity that Sherlock relishes with closed eyes and the subtle inhalation of John's scent on his clothes, John pulls away and stands. He shuts off the telly and claims he's heading to bed. "See you in the morning, Sherlock," he murmurs, and then he's gone. Sherlock breathes in and out, feeling cluttered and uptight, his mind racing and his chest clenching. What was all that? John was never been so affectionate before. He's been concerned, yes, but never more affectionate than a hand on Sherlock's shoulder, or a pat on his knee or upper back. Something is very different here, and Sherlock only wishes he knew what.